In 1953, the United States government had a rule, a strict, unwavering rule. It was written in the policy books of the U.S. Weather Bureau, and it was enforced with the threat of immediate termination. Meteorologists were forbidden, absolutely forbidden, from saying one specific word on the radio. They believed that this single word would cause more panic, more hysteria, and more chaos than the thing itself. They believed that the American public was too fragile to handle the truth. On June 8th, that silence, that refusal to speak, killed 116 people in 3 minutes. This is not just a story about wind. This is not just a story about a storm. This is the story of the Flint-Beecher tornado and the terrible price of keeping a secret. To understand why a government would gag its own scientists, you have to understand the world of 1953. It is a time of aggressive, manic optimism and deep, paralyzing fear. Flint, Michigan, is the heartbeat of that optimism. It is a General Motors boomtown. If you are living in Flint, you are living the absolute peak of the American dream. The factories are running 24 hours a day, churning out Buicks and Chevrolets. The paychecks are fat. The houses in the suburbs are brand new, with manicured lawns and white picket fences. It is the era of I Love Lucy. It is the era of the Sunday drive. But underneath that shiny chrome surface, there is a shadow. The Cold War is freezing the blood of every adult in America. The Soviet Union has the bomb. The newspapers are filled with maps showing blast radiuses. School children are being taught to duck and cover under their wooden desks at the sound of a siren. The psychological state of the nation is fragile. People are watching the skies constantly. They are scanning the horizon, but they are looking for the wrong enemy. They are looking for Soviet bombers. They are looking for the flash of an atomic weapon. No one, absolutely no one, is looking for the wind, and the Weather Bureau knows this. They operate under a doctrine that says the public is on a hair trigger. If a weatherman goes on the radio and says a tornado is coming, the Bureau believes people won't take shelter. They believe people will die of heart attacks or trample each other in the streets trying to flee. So, they ban the word. Instead of tornado warning, they use phrases like severe local storms or possible squalls, euphemisms, soft words, safe words. Words that mean nothing when an F5 monster is grinding your house into toothpicks. June 8th begins like any other summer day in the industrial north. But meteorologically, the pieces are moving on a chessboard that no one can clearly see. In 1953, there is no Doppler radar. There are no satellites beaming high-definition images from space. There are no computer models running simulations. Forecasting weather in the 50s is a dark art. It is done with pencils, paper maps, and pressure readings telegraphed over a wire. A meteorologist is essentially a detective working in the dark, trying to solve a murder before it happens, with half the clues missing. On the morning of June 8th, a massive tongue of hot, moist air licks up from the Gulf of Mexico. It crosses the country, unstopped, and settles over Michigan. By noon, the temperature in Flint hits 90 degrees. But it isn't just the heat, it is the humidity. It is a wet, heavy, suffocating blanket. The dew point climbs into the 70s. If you have ever lived in the Midwest, you know this feeling. The air feels thick enough to chew. You walk outside, and your shirt sticks to your back instantly. The atmosphere feels pregnant. It is waiting for a spark, and that spark is racing in from the west. A cold front, a wedge of dense, chilly air, is plowing into the hot soup sitting over Flint. At the Weather Bureau office in Detroit, the meteorologists are watching the pressure gauges drop. They are sweating in their shirt sleeves, looking at the hand-drawn maps. They see the setup. They see the shear. They see the instability. They know that the conditions are perfect for disaster. But the phone on the desk remains silent. The teletype machines clack out routine observations. Partly cloudy. Chance of thunderstorms. Because of the rule. By late afternoon, the physics of the atmosphere are beginning to break down. The hot air wants to go up. The cold air wants to go down. And the wind shear, the change in wind speed with height, is starting to spin the whole mess like a top. At 4 p.m., a squall line develops in eastern Michigan. To the people on the ground, it just looks like a storm. Dark clouds, thunder, a relief from the oppressive heat. But inside those clouds, something terrifying is being born. Let's zoom into the Beecher district. This is a suburb just north of Flint. It is a working-class community. Small, sturdy homes, a drive-in theater, a high school. People are coming home from the factories. They are tired. They are hot. And strange things are starting to happen. Survivors from the day recount a peculiar phenomenon. The static electricity in the air becomes so intense that it defies physics. One woman, washing her dishes, reaches for the faucet and a blue spark, an inch long, snaps from her finger to the metal. A farmer, miles outside of town, watches his cattle. They are huddled together, heads down, facing away from the wind. They are silent. And then, there is the sky. If you ask anyone who survived June 8th, they don't talk about the wind first. They talk about the color. Around 7 p.m., as the sun begins to lower, the sky doesn't turn gray. It doesn't turn black. It turns a sickly, bruised shade of green. Not a subtle green, a vibrant, nauseating, deep olive green. It looks like the inside of a bruise. It looks wrong. It looks infected. This is caused by the sunlight filtering through millions of tons of hail suspended high in the thunderhead. It is a sign that the storm is holding a massive amount of ice, just waiting to drop. But the people of Beecher don't know the science. They just know that the world looks like it's underwater. Children stop playing in the streets and look up. It's eerie. It's beautiful in a horrifying way. And then, the birds fall. This is not a metaphor. As the pressure plummets ahead of the storm, the rapid change affects the inner ears of birds. They become disoriented. They can't fly. Residents report seeing sparrows and robins simply dropping out of the air, hopping confusedly on the lawns. Nature is screaming a warning. The atmosphere is screaming a warning. The birds are screaming a warning. But the radio is playing jazz. 7:30 p.m. The sun is setting. The heat has not broken. It is still 90 degrees. A few miles near the Genesee-Mont-Morris town line, a finger of cloud lowers from the rotating base of the storm. It is tentative at first. It dances. It weaves. It looks like a rope, pale and gray against the green sky. It touches the ground. At this moment, it is not yet a monster. It is a narrow funnel, tearing up sod, snapping branches. If it stayed like this, it would be a footnote in the local paper. Barn damage by high wind. But the storm has tapped into that massive reservoir of energy, that hot, humid air from the Gulf, and it takes a deep, deep breath. The funnel widens. It darkens. It goes from a rope to a stovepipe, then from a stovepipe to a barrel. It begins to feed. It sucks in dust. It sucks in dirt. It turns from gray to black. It is no longer made of cloud. It is made of the earth itself, and it turns. It locks onto a path. Northeast, moving at 40 miles per hour, directly toward the Coldwater Road, directly toward Beecher. Let's pause the clock here. It is 8 p.m. Inside the Weather Bureau, the tension is breaking point. They have reports of a funnel. They know it is on the ground. The meteorologist in charge has a choice. He can follow the protocol, protect his job, and issue a severe storm warning. Or he can break the rules, grab the microphone, and scream, "Tornado." He hesitates. He types out a bulletin. He warns of dangerous squalls. He does not say the word. Meanwhile, in Beecher, life is tragically, heartbreakingly normal. Let's look at the Bennett family. They live in a modest house right off the main drag. The father, John, has just washed up after a shift at the plant. The mother, Alice, is in the kitchen. They are making roast beef. Think about that. Roast beef. A slow-cooked meal on a 90-degree day. That is how dedicated they are to routine. That is how safe they feel. They are sitting around the table. The windows are open to catch a breeze. but there is no breeze. The air is dead still. They don't have the radio on. Why would they? The news is just bad news from Korea or scary talk about the bomb. They want a quiet family dinner. They are talking about a camping trip planned for the weekend. They are arguing, playfully, about who is going to pack the fishing gear. John looks at the clock on the wall. It is 8:25 p.m. It's getting dark early, he says. Alice nods. She wipes sweat from her forehead. It feels like rain. Good, it'll break the heat. They have no idea that 5 miles away, the rain they are waiting for is actually a meat grinder. They have no idea that the pressure in their house is already starting to drop, causing the walls to groan ever so slightly. They have no idea that in exactly 4 minutes, that clock on the wall will stop forever. At the North Flint Drive-In Theater, the projectionist is threading a film. Families are parking their cars. Speakers are being hooked onto windows. Teenagers are sneaking kisses in the back rows. It is the perfect American night out. The projectionist looks out the booth window. He sees the horizon. It isn't a flat line anymore. It is boiling. A massive, wedge-shaped wall of darkness is consuming the twilight. It is so wide, nearly half a mile wide now, that it doesn't look like a tornado. It doesn't look like the pictures in The Wizard of Oz. It looks like the night itself is falling down to the ground. And it is loud. Survivors often say it sounded like a freight train. That is the cliché. But the survivors of Beecher, they say something different. They say it sounded like a million bees, a high-pitched, buzzing, screaming drone that vibrates your teeth. Or they say it sounded like the earth was grinding its gears. At 8:28 p.m., the power at the drive-in flickers and dies. The movie screen goes black. The music stops. For a second, there is a confused murmur from the cars, people honking horns. "Hey, put the movie back on." Then they hear it. A roar so deep it is felt in the chest before it is heard in the ears. At the Bennett house. Alice drops a fork. She looks at John. "What is that?" she whispers. John stands up. He goes to the window. He looks out into the street. The streetlights are out. The world is pitch black. But then, a power transformer explodes down the block. A flash of blue-white light. And in that flash, John sees it. He sees a house across the street. A house made of brick and oak. Simply dissolve. It doesn't fall over. It explodes outward, turning into dust and splinters in a fraction of a second. He sees the monster. It is right there. It is on top of them. He turns back to his family. He opens his mouth to scream. He wants to say, "Run." He wants to say, "Basement." But the sound of the house ripping apart around them drowns him out. The windows shatter inward. The roof lifts off like a lid off a jar. And the clock strikes 8:29. The Bennett house does not collapse. Collapse implies gravity. Collapse implies a structure failing under its own weight. This is not a collapse. This is erasure. To understand what is about to happen to the Bennett family, and to the thousands of other souls in Beecher, we have to stop looking at this storm as weather. We have to look at it as a machine. In the center of the funnel, the pressure is dropping so fast that it creates a vacuum. It is not a figurative vacuum. It is a literal, physical void. If you were to stand in the center of it with a barometer, the needle wouldn't just fall. It would smash against the bottom of the glass. This pressure drop does something terrifying to a sealed house. Inside the Bennett home, the air pressure is normal. It is 14.7 pounds per square inch. But outside, in the throat of the monster, the pressure drops instantly by 10%. That doesn't sound like much, but do the math. That difference creates an outward force of hundreds of pounds on every single square foot of the walls. So, before the wind even touches the bricks, the house is trying to explode. It is trying to exhale its own walls. John Bennett sees the window pane bow outward. It curves like a bubble, and then it bursts. It wasn't like the movies. In the movies, the wind blows things down. This was different. I was looking at my living room wall, and it just popped. It popped out into the yard like a cork out of a bottle. And then the roof just floated away. It didn't fly. It floated. The clock on the wall hits 8:29 p.m. The monster is now fully upon them. It is important to visualize what this looks like. We often imagine a smooth gray funnel, but an F5 tornado, up close, is not smooth. It is a boiling, turbulent mess. Meteorologists call it a multiple vortex structure. Imagine a main carousel spinning at 200 miles per hour, but inside that carousel, there are smaller, tighter tornadoes spinning even faster. They are called suction spots. These are the teeth of the grinder. They spin at speeds that might exceed 300 miles per hour. We don't know for sure. Our instruments can't survive to measure them. When one of these suction spots hits a house, it doesn't just knock it down. It atomizes it. It turns wood into sawdust. It turns glass into sand. John grabs Alice. He doesn't have time to get to the basement. He doesn't have time to think. He tackles her to the floor in the hallway. He covers her head with his arms, and the world ends. The sound is no longer a roar. It is a physical weight. It presses down on their skulls. The air pressure change pops their ears with a violence that causes immediate vertigo. John feels the floorboards beneath him vibrating, not shaking, vibrating, like a guitar string that has been plucked by a giant. The roof rips free. The sound of the nails pulling out of the wood is like a scream. Scree, pop, thousands of nails, all at once. Debris begins to rain down on them, but it's not just wood. It is a slurry of mud, insulation, and shredded shingles. It hits them with the force of a sandblaster. John shuts his eyes tight. He screams into the carpet, but he can't hear his own voice. He feels a sudden, violent tug on his back. The wind is trying to lift him. It is grabbing his shirt. It is grabbing his belt. It feels like a hand, a massive, invisible hand, trying to peel him off the floor. He digs his fingers into the carpet. He holds on to Alice with a strength fueled by pure adrenaline. He knows, with absolute clarity, that if he lets go, they will die. Let's move 5 miles down the road. The tornado is not just killing the Bennetts. It is eating the Coldwater Road. It approaches the North Flint Drive-In Theater. This is a scene of purely American leisure. There are 200 cars in the lot. A double feature is playing. The concession stand is selling popcorn. The smell of butter and hot asphalt fills the air. Inside a blue Ford sedan, a young couple, 17-year-old Mark and his girlfriend Sarah, are arguing about the movie. Mark looks in the rearview mirror. He sees something that his brain refuses to process. Behind the theater screen, the sky has vanished. A wall of churning debris, blacker than the night, is swallowing the horizon. It is backlit by the exploding power transformers. Zap. A flash of blue light reveals the horror. Trees are flying through the air, not branches, whole trees, roots and all. They are tumbling end over end like twigs. Mark freezes. He sees the projection booth, a sturdy concrete block building, simply disintegrate. 1 second it is there. The next, it is a cloud of dust. "Get down!" he screams. He grabs Sarah's head and pushes her into the footwell of the passenger seat. He dives over her. The tornado hits the drive-in. A car is a heavy object. It weighs 2 tons. It is designed to hug the road, but to an F5, a car is a leaf. The wind gets under the Ford. It lifts it. Survivors at the drive-in describe a sensation of weightlessness. For a terrifying second, the gravity is gone. The car is airborne. It rotates slowly. Inside, Mark and Sarah are tumbled like clothes in a dryer. Broken glass fills the cabin. The windshield implodes, showering them with thousands of cubic diamonds. The car flies for 50 feet. It slams into the ground on its roof. Crunch. The metal screams. The roof pillars collapse. The space inside the car shrinks to inches, but the storm isn't done. It rolls the car, over and over and over. Bang, bang, bang. Mark is screaming, but his mouth is full of grit. He can taste the soil of Michigan. The tornado is forcing dirt through every crack in the vehicle. It is packing the car with earth, trying to bury them alive. I remember the smell. That's what wakes me up at night. It didn't smell like rain. It smelled like a gas station that had exploded in a pine forest. It was this mix of high-octane fuel and sap. And the sound, God, the sound. It wasn't a train, it was a grinder. It sounded like the earth was being chewed up. The tornado moves on. It is traveling northeast at 40 miles per hour. It is creating a debris ball that is now visible on military radar screens hundreds of miles away. This debris ball is a lethal cloud. It is filled with 2x4s and bricks, car engines, refrigerators, and bodies, and it is rotating at 260 miles per hour. Let's pause and look at the physics of the debris. When a piece of straw, a flimsy piece of dry grass, is accelerated to these speeds, it becomes a projectile with the penetrating power of a bullet. Responders will later find pieces of straw driven 2 inches deep into telephone poles. They will find a vinyl record, a fragile disc of plastic, embedded halfway into a hardwood tree trunk. They will find a car engine block, weighing 400 pounds, sitting in a living room where the car was parked 3 blocks away. This is the missile hazard. If you are in the open, you are not just fighting the wind. You are fighting a shotgun blast of civilization. Every object your neighbor owned, their toaster, their silverware, their television, is now a weapon aimed at your head. The tornado crosses Saginaw Street. It hits the Beecher High School. The brick walls of the gymnasium are 18 inches thick. They are built to withstand decades of winters. The tornado punches through them as if they were made of wet paper. The roof trusses, massive steel beams, are twisted like pretzels. They are not just bent, they are knotted. The pressure drop inside the school sucks the air out of the hallways. Classroom doors are ripped off their hinges. Blackboards are scoured clean of chalk, then scoured clean of paint, then scoured clean of the slate itself. Thankfully, the school is empty, but the neighborhood behind it is not. The tornado is now at its peak width, 800 yards wide. It is a mile-wide grinder moving through a subdivision of small, wood-frame houses. The destruction here is absolute. This is what meteorologists call slabbed, meaning nothing is left above the foundation. The floorboards are ripped up. The plumbing is ripped out of the concrete. The house isn't just gone. The evidence that a house ever existed is gone. Let's follow the path of a single survivor, a 7-year-old girl named Kathy. She is in her bedroom. Her parents are in the kitchen. When the roar starts, she hides under her bed. It is a small, instinctual act. The tornado rips the house apart. Kathy feels the bed lift up. She grabs the metal frame. She is sucked out of the room. She is thrown into the night. Try to imagine the sensory overload of a 7-year-old child flying through the air inside a tornado. It is pitch black, punctuated by the blinding flashes of exploding power lines. She is tumbling through a cloud of debris. She feels things hitting her, soft things like insulation, hard things like wood. She lands. She lands in a muddy field, 200 yards away from where her bedroom used to be. She is alive. She is relatively unhurt. She sits up in the mud. The rain is hammering down on her. It is cold. She looks around. She sees a cow standing 10 feet away. The cow is staring at her. It is motionless. And then, the cow simply falls over, dead. Not a mark on it. The pressure change collapsed its lungs. Kathy opens her mouth to call for her mother, but she can't speak. Her mouth is full of mud. Her ears are ringing so loud she thinks sirens are going off inside her head. She stands up and starts to walk. She doesn't know where she is going. She just walks. She steps on something sharp. She looks down. It is a broken picture frame. She picks it up. It is a picture of a family she doesn't know. I was walking. I didn't know where I was. I was barefoot. I remember stepping on glass, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel anything. I was just empty. I saw a man sitting on a pile of bricks. He was just sitting there, holding a steering wheel. No car, just the wheel. He looked at me and said, "Did you see my dog?" That's all he said. "Did you see my dog?" 8:32 p.m. The tornado is tearing through the Kurtz gravel pit. It picks up tons of gravel. Now, the wind is a sandblaster loaded with rocks. It hits a row of houses on the edge of town. The paint is stripped off the cars parked in the driveways. The chrome is stripped off the bumpers. The siding is stripped off the houses. Then the sheathing is stripped off. Then the insulation is sucked out of the walls. Then the studs snap. It is a dismantling process that happens in seconds, but in a specific order. Layer by layer, the homes are peeled like an onion. Inside one of these homes, a family of 4 is huddled in the southwest corner of the basement. This was the advice at the time. Go to the southwest corner. It was bad advice. The house collapses into the basement. The chimney, a column of thousands of bricks, crashes down through the floor. It lands inches from the father's head. The dust in the basement is choking. It is thick, dry, drywall dust mixed with soot from the chimney. They cough, they gag, they can't breathe, they are buried, they are alive. But they are trapped in a tomb of their own making. They can hear the wind screaming above them. It sounds like a jet engine parked on their driveway. They hold hands in the dark. They pray. Our Father, who art in heaven. But they can't hear the words. The roar is too loud. 8:33 p.m. The tornado has been on the ground for 3 minutes. It has traveled nearly 20 miles. It has consumed everything in its path. But now, the physics are changing again. The storm is moving over the colder waters of Lake Huron. The heat source, the fuel, is cut off. The funnel begins to narrow. It writhes. It twists. It looks like a gray snake struggling to get back into the sky. The roar changes pitch. It goes from a deep, bass rumble to a high-pitched hiss. It sounds like the storm is angry, like it is frustrated. It lashes out one last time. It hits a final farmhouse near the shore. It tears the roof off the barn. It spins a tractor around like a toy top. And then it lifts. The funnel withdraws into the clouds. The rotation slows. The debris that was suspended in the air, the wood, the metal, the paper, begins to fall. It rains debris for miles. Checks from Beecher bank accounts fall on lawns in Canada. A wedding gown lands in a tree 10 miles away. A high school diploma lands in a field across the lake. The sky is still green. The clouds are still boiling. But the connection to the earth is broken. The monster is gone. And then, the transition happens. It is the most jarring shift in the entire event. 1 second. The world is filled with 300-mile-per-hour winds and the sound of 1,000,000 explosions. The next second, stillness. Total, absolute stillness. The wind stops. The trees stop moving. The rain stops for a brief moment. And the silence rushes in to fill the void. It is a heavy silence, a thick silence. It is the silence of a battlefield after the shooting stops. In the darkness of Beecher, in the wreckage of the drive-in, in the basement of the Bennett house, no one moves, no one speaks. The survivors are suspended in a moment of shock. Their brains are trying to reboot. They are trying to understand if they are dead or alive. A cricket starts to chirp. Just one. Then, a dog barks. A terrified, lonely yelp. Then, a human voice. A woman screaming a name. David! And then another. Mom! And then, the wailing begins. It rises from the rubble like a chorus, a choir of pain and confusion rising up into the dark, sulfur-smelling night. But for now, let's hold on that first moment of silence, that split second where the violence ended and the tragedy began. The silence does not remain empty for long. It is quickly filled by a sensation that is even more terrifying than the noise, the smell. Underneath the rubble of Beecher, thousands of natural gas lines have been severed. The high-pressure mains are venting directly into the atmosphere. The gas mixes with the smell of pulverized pine trees. It mixes with the scent of wet, raw earth, and it smells exactly like sulfur. To the dazed survivors stumbling out of the wreckage, this smell is the final piece of a horrifying puzzle. They stand up in the darkness. They look for landmarks. They look for the school. They look for the church steeple. They look for the water tower. Everything is gone. The horizon is flat. The only light comes from the distant fires starting to burn in the ruins. In 1953, the human brain is not conditioned to process tornado on this scale. The brain is conditioned by newspapers, by radio, by school drills to process war. Survivors later told reporters that their first lucid thought, their absolute conviction, was that the Cold War had finally turned hot. I crawled out of the basement. I looked around, and there was nothing standing, just fire and smoke, and I smelled that gas. My first thought wasn't about the wind. I thought, the Russians did it. They finally dropped the bomb. Flint is gone. Detroit is gone. We are the only ones left. Imagine the psychological weight of that moment. You have just survived the violence of the wind, and now, standing in the rain, you believe you are standing in the radioactive fallout of World War III. People didn't run to check on their neighbors immediately. They stood paralyzed. They checked their skin for radiation burns. They looked at the sky, expecting to see Soviet bombers. It wasn't until the first headlights appeared, cutting through the darkness from the south, that the spell was broken. It wasn't the Red Army. It was the Michigan State Police. It wasn't uranium. It was wind. The rescue effort that begins at 9 p.m. is a descent into hell. There are no helicopters. There are no thermal imaging drones. There are no jaws of life. There are only men with flashlights, shovels, and bare hands. The roads leading into Beecher are impassable. They are blocked by mountains of debris, tangled power lines, and overturned cars. Ambulances cannot get through. So, they improvise. Grocery delivery trucks, station wagons, milk vans, anything with wheels is commandeered. They drive as far as they can. Then, the rescuers get out and walk into the mud. The scene they find is surreal. The National Guard arrives shortly after midnight. These are young men. Many of them are veterans of Korea. They have seen combat. But they are not prepared for this. One guardsman later wrote that the most disturbing thing wasn't the bodies. It was the tornado paradox. He described finding a house that had been reduced to splinters. The bathtub was found 3 blocks away. The car was wrapped around a tree, but sitting on a pristine patch of grass. In the middle of the chaos was a kitchen table, and on that table, a vase of flowers, upright, with the water still in it. The wind had erased the house, but spared the flowers. It is a capriciousness that feels cruel. It feels like a mockery of order. The injured are flooding into Hurley Hospital in downtown Flint. The hospital is overwhelmed within an hour. The backup generators are humming. The hallways are slick with mud and blood. Doctors are operating on gurneys in the corridors. Nurses are tearing up bed sheets because they have run out of bandages. They are treating puncture wounds. They are treating crush injuries. They are treating fractures. But the tragedy is not in the hospital. The tragedy is at the Armory, the Flint National Guard. Armory is designated as the temporary morgue. Throughout the dark, wet hours of the night, the trucks keep backing up to the loading dock. Soldiers, their faces pale, unload the victims. They line them up in rows on the gymnasium floor. Row after row. They cover them with gray wool blankets, then with tarps, then with whatever cloth they can find. And then, the families come. This is the hardest part of the story to tell. But we must tell it, because this is the reality of June 8th. Fathers, still covered in the mud of the storm, walking down the rows, lifting the corners of the blankets, because the wind was so violent. It stripped the victims of their clothes. It stripped them of their wallets. It stripped them of their identity. Identification becomes a game of heartbreaking details. A husband recognizes his wife not by her face, but by a scar on her hand. A mother recognizes her daughter by the socks she was wearing. John Bennett, the man who was eating roast beef just hours ago, is there. He is on crutches. His leg is broken. He is bandaged. He is walking the rows. He stops at a small shape. He kneels down. He lifts the blanket. He doesn't scream. He doesn't cry out. He just places his hand on the chest of the body, and he stays there for an hour. The silence in the armory is heavy. It is a suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor and the occasional stifled sob. By the morning of June 9th, the sun rises over Michigan. It is a clear, bright morning. The humidity is gone. The sky is a brilliant blue. But on the ground, the scale of the horror is finally visible. Aerial photographers go up in Cessnas. They look down at Beecher. From the air, it looks like a giant. Angry claw has dragged a finger across the earth. Meteorologists call it the scar. It is a brown streak cut through the green grid of the suburbs. Inside that streak, Nothing stands. The final numbers come in. 116 dead, 844 injured, 340 homes destroyed, and immediately, as the shock wears off, a new emotion takes over. Rage. Senator Homer Ferguson flies in from Washington, D.C. He lands in Flint. He is driven to the site. He gets out of his car on Coldwater Road. He looks at the devastation. He looks at the families digging through the rubble of their lives. And he asks the question that is on everyone's lips. Why didn't they know? How is it possible, in the most advanced industrial nation on Earth, in the age of the atom, that an entire community could be wiped off the map without a single siren sounding? This question triggers a congressional inquiry, and that inquiry peels back the layers of bureaucracy we talked about in Act 1. It exposes the forbidden word. Reporters start digging. They find the meteorologists who saw the conditions. They find the memos. They find the teletypes that used phrases like severe local storms instead of tornado. The public is furious. They realize that the silence, which the government claimed was to prevent panic, actually prevented survival. If the radio had screamed tornado at 8 p.m., the Bennetts might have gone to the basement. The people at the drive-in might have run to the ditches. The government had gambled with their lives, and the government had lost. This investigation is complex, and it reveals a dark truth about how institutions often protect themselves rather than the public they serve. Because of the pressure from the public and the sheer, undeniable scale of the Beecher tragedy, the Weather Bureau is forced to surrender. The ban on the word tornado is lifted, but they realize that simply saying the word isn't enough. They need a system. They need a language that the public can understand. They need to differentiate between it might happen and it is happening. This is the birth of the system you rely on today: the watch and the warning. A tornado watch means the ingredients are there. The atmosphere is primed. The fuel is ready. A tornado warning means the fire is lit. It means a funnel has been spotted, or radar has detected the rotation. It seems simple to us now, but in 1953, this was revolutionary. It was a philosophical shift. It was an admission by the government that the American people could be trusted with the truth. That fear, when properly directed, is not a liability. It is a survival tool. But the legacy of Flint-Beecher goes deeper than just words. It changed the science itself. Meteorologists realized that on June 8th, they were blind. They were trying to predict the wind by measuring air pressure with barometers. It was like trying to predict a car crash by listening to the traffic report. They needed eyes. They needed to see the storm inside the cloud. This disaster accelerated the push for a technology that had been used to hunt airplanes in World War II: radar. Within a few years of the Beecher disaster, the Weather Bureau began installing surplus military radars across the Midwest. They discovered something incredible. Radar works by bouncing radio waves off of raindrops. They found that a tornado doesn't just look like a blob on the screen. It has a shape. When the rain wraps around the spinning updraft of a supercell, it creates a distinctive shape on the radar screen. It looks like the number 6, or a hook. They called it the hook echo. It is the fingerprint of the monster. If the Beecher tornado had happened 10 years later, the radar operator in Detroit would have seen that hook. He would have seen the debris ball. The teletypes would have clattered instantly. The sirens would have wailed minutes before the wind arrived. And John Bennett might have finished his dinner. Let's return to Beecher today. If you drive down Coldwater Road now, you won't see the scars. The earth heals quickly. The grass grows back. The trees are replanted. The houses have been rebuilt. They are modern now. Vinyl siding, double-paned windows. The North Flint Drive-In is gone, replaced by a strip mall and a fast food restaurant. Life has moved on, but there is a spot near the intersection where the storm was at its most violent, where the past is preserved. There is a stone monument. It is simple, solemn. On it are etched the names, 116 of them. Families still gather there every June 8th. They are older now, the children of 1953. The ones who were thrown into the mud are the grandparents of today. They bring flowers, They touch the cold stone. They remember the green sky. They remember the sound of the freight train. And they remember the silence. The Flint-Beecher tornado remains the last F5 tornado to strike a major metropolitan area in the darkest days of the Cold War. It stands as a grim milestone in American history. It taught us a brutal lesson. We cannot stop the wind. We cannot legislate the weather. We can build stronger houses. We can build better radars. We can send alerts to your smartphone in milliseconds. We can give you 15 minutes of lead time instead of 0. But when the atmosphere decides to balance its equation, when the heat of the Gulf collides with the cold of the plains with enough violence, we are still just small, fragile creatures living on the surface of a volatile planet. The monster is still out there. It is sleeping in the clouds, and next time, thanks to the lessons learned in the ruins of Beecher, it won't be silent.